2 months after the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, Indiana has become the first state to approve a near total ban on abortion. The state legislature passed the new bill on Friday, which was immediately signed into law by Indiana's Republican governor. Effective on September 15th, Indiana abortion clinics will lose their licenses if they perform the procedure. Doctors who perform abortions illegally or those who do so legally without reporting it will also lose their licenses. Abortions will still be legal in cases of rape and incest, but only before 10 weeks post-fertilization. And the procedure will still be allowed when the health of the mother is in jeopardy or if the fetus is diagnosed with a lethal anomaly. Before the bill's passage, Indiana House Democrats and some of the 9 Republicans who also opposed it spoke out against the new law.
Each one of us legislators could be raped. We could have a piece of our soul ripped from us and be violated. But only 23% of us can know what it's like to fear that horrific moment could create a baby.
We are told by the Republican supermajority that you cannot legislate moral behavior when it comes to issues like gun violence in America. But in a matter of 2 weeks, we will legislate away a woman's God-given free will to make her own decisions.
When I moved to Indiana 30 years ago, I did not have access to affordable women's health care and contraceptive services. As a result, I had an unplanned pregnancy. I ask this body not to continue to ignore the women in this body, and most importantly, the minority women in this body who continue to speak knowledge and truth to this matter.
Joining us now, one of the women you just heard from, Democratic State Representative from Indiana, Maureen Bauer. Thank you, Representative Bauer, for being with us, and we just played your comments there. In the days after this law was passed and signed by the governor, tell us, how are your constituents reacting?
Well, Jonathan, thank you. It's clear that this was a very extreme piece of legislation. Women in Indiana woke up Saturday morning to learn that in the middle of the night while they were sleeping, Governor Holcomb signed this bill into law at 11:15 p.m. and woke up to learn that their rights and the rights of all childbearing women, all victims of rape, sexual assault, were rolled back essentially 50 years. Both Republican and Democrats alike in the state opposed a ban on abortion. Republicans took their own poll, which revealed that the majority of residents in the state support the law as it remains prior to this passage of Senate Bill 1. They oppose a ban on abortion. And so I think the Indiana Republican Party knows they're moving us in the wrong direction. They know that they're going against the will of the majority of residents here. And I think they know that they are catering to the extreme Republican Party, not the small government Indiana Republican Party that we once knew, who valued individual freedoms and privacy.
So Indiana becomes the first state to put in place a near total ban on abortion since the Supreme Court decision. Certainly won't be the last. Now that this has happened and it's come into law, and you said signed in the dead of night on a Friday in August, what actions can you and your fellow Democrats, what, if anything, can you and your colleagues do to protect the rights of women in your home state?
Well, we know that anyone who is in those seats in January, when we reconvene for a regular session, will come for those narrow exemptions that were included in the bill. The hardest part of that debate was listening to House Republican members go back and forth on the House floor whether they should or shouldn't allow any exemptions for victims of rape and incest, including children under the age of consent. There was an amendment proposed by leadership in the House Republican Party that would have eliminated those narrow 10 weeks that were provided for incest and rape victims. And we know come January, they will attempt to do that again. And so we are not stuck in reverse. There is a path forward, and that will be at the polls in November. That early voting starts October 11th. The speaker himself said to anyone who's unhappy with this policy, they can vote for new legislators. So in a state that's heavily gerrymandered more than the rest of the country, we have to show up. Anyone who has voted in the past, bring your friends and family who feel that their voices weren't heard. Unfortunately, we don't have the opportunity like Kansas to have this question put on the ballot. We did have an amendment to the bill that would allow us to do just that. And it was voted down by the majority because they know they are not on the right side with the majority of Hoosiers on this.
So the answer may not be the same exact measure as Kansas, but if Democrats can have that same sort of enthusiasm in Indiana, that would seem to be, as you say, their best option here. Indiana State Representative Maureen Bauer, we really appreciate you being on with us this morning and your impassioned words on this issue.